The arrogant teenager ruthlessly insulted the disabled veteran, completely unaware of the massive mistake he just made. He thought the old man was just a weak beggar, until an entire platoon of elite Navy SEALs showed up to defend him. This entitled kid humiliated a wheelchair-bound war hero in public, but karma was about to strike back incredibly hard. Watch what happens when 24 elite military operators shut down an entire city block to teach a bully a lesson. It starts with a sound, not a loud one, just the kind of sound that gets lost in the daily hum of a busy coffee shop. The clatter of a fork dropped on a ceramic plate. But in the sharp silence that followed, it might as well have been a gunshot. The fork lay on the floor, next to the wheel of an old man's chair. A young man, no older than 20, stood over him, his face a mask of sneering contempt. "Your whole life," the young man spat, his voice dripping with cruelty, "was a complete and utter waste." You might think this sounds like a scene from a movie. But picture this, a Tuesday morning at the Daily Grind coffee shop on Elm Street, a place that usually smells of roasted beans and quiet ambition. On this day, the air grew thick with the poison of disrespect. The target was Arthur Penhaligon. To most, he was just an old man in a corner booth, stooped and confined to a wheelchair, a faded Marine Corps cap his only constant companion. Bald by age, trembled slightly on the armrests of his chair. He was 82 years old, a man who had seen empires rise and fall, who now found his world shrunk to the size of a small-town coffee shop. He was invisible, the way old people so often are, a black-and-white photograph in a world of blinding color. But to one young man, a kid named Chad who wore his arrogance like a designer jacket, Arthur wasn't invisible. He was an inconvenience, an obstacle, a target. The story of what happened next didn't just stay within the four walls of that coffee shop. It rippled outwards, a shockwave that would trigger a response so powerful it would bring a city to a standstill and show the world the true meaning of honor. This is the story of how a moment of shocking disrespect was answered by the ultimate display of respect. The morning had started like any other. Arthur maneuvered his wheelchair through his daily routine, the cracked sidewalk, the ramp up to the coffee shop door, the careful navigation between tables. It was a small journey, but it was his. He ordered his usual, 1 black coffee, no sugar, and paid with exact change from a worn leather pouch. He was a man of routine, a relic from a life where precision meant the difference between breathing and not. He found his usual spot, a small table in the corner where he could watch the world go by. For an hour, peace reigned, the gentle murmur of conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, a simple pleasure in a life that had known too much chaos. The trouble arrived on a wave of loud laughter and cheap cologne. Chad and his friends swaggered in, treating the coffee shop like their personal lounge. They shoved chairs around and talked loudly, settling at a large table right next to Arthur's corner. First, a backpack slung carelessly knocked into Arthur's wheelchair. He said nothing, simply pulling his chair in a little tighter. Then came the snickers and condescending glances at his faded cap and the prosthetic leg partially visible beneath his trousers. Arthur felt their stares but kept his eyes fixed on the street outside, his jaw set. He had faced down far worse than a few arrogant boys. Head-faced men with guns and hatred in their eyes in the jungles of Vietnam. He could endure this. The real conflict began when Chad, showing off a ridiculous dance move, stumbled hard into Arthur's table. Hot, black coffee sloshed over the side of the mug, spilling onto Arthur's hand and trousers. He hissed in pain. "Hey, watch it!" One of Chad's friends laughed. Chad turned, not with an apology but with irritation. "Dude, your table's in the way," he said, looking at Arthur as if he were furniture. "My apologies," Arthur said quietly, dabbing at the hot coffee on his leg with a napkin. "Yeah, well, you should be," Chad sneered, emboldened. He pointed at Arthur's cap. "What's that? Marine Corps? My grandpa was in the Army, said you Marines were all ego." Arthur didn't reply. His quiet dignity seemed to infuriate Chad even more. In Chad's world, everything was noise and confrontation. Arthur's refusal to engage was a challenge. "What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue?" Chad leaned in. "Was it worth it, all that marching and shooting? My uncle's a history professor. Says you guys were just pawns in a rich man's game. Sacrificed for nothing." The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. The coffee shop fell quiet. Patrons looked over, shocked and uneasy. The barista, a young woman named Sarah, froze mid-task. Arthur finally looked up, his pale blue eyes meeting Chad's. The coffee shop, the sneering boy, it all fell away. He was 19 again in the red dirt of Quezon, the air thick with fear. He saw the face of Corporal Miller, who shared his last cigarette with him before a mortar shell erased him from the earth. He saw Sergeant Davis, who dragged him to safety after shrapnel tore his leg apart, only to be cut down himself moments later. He saw a line of ghosts, young men who never got the chance to grow old, so a boy like this could stand here, safe and happy, and call their sacrifice a waste. A deep weariness settled over Arthur. He had fought for his country, lost his brothers, and lost a part of himself. He came home to a nation that didn't want his story, and had borne it all with stoic silence. But this casual, ignorant desecration felt like a final, cruel blow. Chad, mistaking silence for weakness, pushed his ugliest point. He gestured to the wheelchair and the faded cap. "Look at you. All that for what? A flag and a measly pension? You're a broken old man in a chair. My uncle is right. Your whole life," he declared for the whole shop to hear, "was a complete and utter waste." That's when the fork dropped from Arthur's spasming hand. He didn't bend to pick it up. He couldn't. With a slow, deliberate motion, he began to turn his wheelchair. There were no words. What could you say to a boy who saw a hero and saw only a burden? He maneuvered his chair around Chad's arrogant stance, his wheels silent on the floor. Every eye was on him. They saw his slumped shoulders and the profound sadness in his posture. A proud man, a Marine, stripped of his dignity in public. He pushed open the door and rolled out into the indifferent sunlight, leaving behind a coffee shop filled with a suffocating silence. The silence was broken by a chair scraping back. A man in his late 50s named David Miller stood up. His father had been a tail gunner in a B-17, and his brother had done 2 tours with the 101st Airborne. Chad's words hadn't just insulted an old man, they had desecrated the memory of David's own family. He threw a $20 bill on his table, his eyes locking onto Chad with a gaze of pure ice. He didn't say a word to the boy. Instead, he walked out of the shop, his heart pounding with a cold, focused rage. He saw Arthur half a block down the street, moving slowly, his head bowed. "David caught up to him, sir?" He said gently, "Sir, I'm so sorry for what happened in there." That was unacceptable. Arthur stopped and looked up, his eyes distant. "It's the world we live in now, son," he whispered. "They don't remember," he continued on his way, leaving David standing on the sidewalk, feeling utterly helpless. But helplessness quickly curdled back into anger. "They don't remember," the words echoed in his mind. Back home, he paced his living room, unable to shake the image of the sneer on the boy's face and the shame in the old man's eyes. To do nothing felt like being complicit. His eyes fell on a framed photo on his mantel. Him, 20 years younger, standing next to his nephew, Marcus, grinning in his crisp Navy dress uniform. Marcus was a Navy SEAL, a lieutenant commander, a ghost who moved in the shadows of the world to keep boys like Chad safe. David hesitated. What could he do? Call a high-ranking SEAL to complain about a rude kid? It sounded absurd. But the image of Arthur's face wouldn't leave him. On impulse, he picked up the phone. "Uncle David, everything okay?" Marcus's voice was calm, steady. "Mark, I'm sorry to bother you," David began. And then the whole story tumbled out, his voice shaking with anger. He described Arthur, the Marine cap, the wheelchair, and repeated Chad's ugly words. He said his whole life was a waste, Mark, to his face, and the old man just took it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was different. Underneath the calm was a layer of something cold and hard, like glacial ice. "Where was this, Uncle David?" "The daily grind, on Elm." "And the veteran, did you get his name?" "No, but the barista." "Sarah. She knows him. His name is Arthur. He comes in every day, Arthur," Marcus repeated. "Marine Corps, cap, wheelchair. Yes, Mark, I'm sorry. I just had to tell someone who would get it. It's just wrong." "You did the right thing, Uncle David," Marcus said, his voice now devoid of all emotion. It was his mission voice. "The Brotherhood takes care of its own. Always, don't you worry, we'll handle this." The line went dead, thousands of miles away, on a naval base in Coronado, California. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Thorne lowered his phone. He and his platoon were on a 72-hour stand-down, a brief respite. He turned and walked into the common room where his men, the elite of the elite, were scattered about. "Listen up," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. Everyone froze. He told them the story. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. He just laid out the facts, the coffee shop, The old Marine, the wheelchair, and the words of the boy. As he spoke, the casual atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a heavy, dangerous stillness. These were men who had carried their own brothers from the battlefield. They understood, in their very bones, the price Arthur Penhaligon had paid. This wasn't just an insult, it was a desecration of a sacred pact. When Marcus finished, there was no debate. Just a single question from his Master Chief. "When do we leave, sir?" Now, the logistics of this might seem impossible. Organizing 24 elite soldiers for non-official travel across the country in less than a day seems to violate every protocol in the book. But for men who can materialize from the sea, sky, or land at a moment's notice, arranging a flight isn't a logistical nightmare. It's just another mission, an unofficial one, sure, but a mission nonetheless. Calls were made, favors were pulled, and somewhere, a commanding officer who understood the unwritten laws of the Brotherhood signed off. The objective was simple: restore honor. Within hours, 24 of America's finest warriors were on a military transport, flying east into the night, their dress-white uniforms carefully stowed. The next morning, Elm Street looked the same. Inside the daily grind, the scene was also eerily familiar. Chad was back at the same large table, bragging to new friends about how he had put some old-timer in his place. "You should have seen his face," he laughed. He knew I was right. And in the corner, at his small table, sat Arthur Penhaligon. He'd almost not come, but a defiant spark had ignited within him. He was a Marine. He did not retreat. This coffee shop was his territory, and he wouldn't be pushed off it by a loudmouthed child. The first sign that this day would be different was a sound, a low, rhythmic rumble that grew steadily louder. It wasn't traffic. People on the sidewalk stopped, confused. Cars slowed. Inside the coffee shop, everyone peered out the window, and then they came into view. Marching down the center of Elm Street was a column of men, 24 of them, moving with a terrifying, beautiful precision. They were in the brilliant dress-white uniforms of the United States Navy. The stark white and polished black shoes were a vision from another world, dropped into the middle of a mundane Tuesday. The platoon of Navy SEALs halted directly in front of the coffee shop's large plate-glass window. A silent, white-clad army. Inside, every face was pressed against the glass. Chad and his friends had fallen silent, their bravado gone. And then, they saw who the SEALs were facing. Their entire powerful formation was oriented toward one person, the old man in the wheelchair, sitting alone in the corner. Arthur stared back, his mind struggling to process the impossible sight. He saw the SEAL tridents gleaming on their chests. He didn't understand. Marcus Thorne's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "Platoon! Present arms!" In a single unified motion that cracked like lightning, 24 men snapped their right hands up in a salute. This wasn't a casual gesture. It was a salute of profound respect, aimed like a weapon of pure reverence at the frail old man in the window. In that moment, Arthur understood. The confusion on his face melted away as tears began to stream down his weathered cheeks. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a very long time. The boy had seen a waste. These warriors saw a founder of their feast. Marcus took one step forward, his eyes only on Arthur. He spoke loudly, his voice ringing with conviction. "Corporal Arthur Penhaligon, United States Marine Corps, on behalf of the United States Navy and a grateful nation, we thank you for your service." The applause started with one person, then spread like wildfire through the crowd. People were crying and cheering, witnessing a moment of pure grace. Marcus continued, "Your sacrifice was not in vain. It is the foundation upon which we stand. The line you held is the line we hold today. Thank you, sir, semper fidelis." Inside, Chad had shrunk into his chair, pale with a sickening understanding. He was small, insignificant. His friends quietly slipped away, leaving him alone. The SEALs held their salute, and Arthur, with a strength that seemed to come from some deep, untapped well, pushed himself up slightly. With a trembling, gnarled hand, he slowly, deliberately, raised it to his wrinkled brow. He returned their salute, a Marine corporal and a platoon of Navy SEALs, holding each other in a moment of silent, perfect communion. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus gave the command to lower the salute. The SEALs moved as one. Marcus entered the coffee shop, walked past Chad's table without a glance, and knelt beside Arthur. He took the old man's trembling hand in his own. "It's an honor to meet you, Corporal," he said, his voice now soft and full of warmth. That moment, captured on a dozen cell phone cameras, was about remembrance. It wasn't about revenge on a foolish boy, had already been judged by the sheer weight of the honor he had insulted. It was a statement, written in disciplined action, that the debt of honor never expires. It was a living demonstration that true strength isn't found in loudmouth disrespect. It's found in the quiet dignity of a man like Arthur Penhaligon, and in the silent promise of the brotherhood that will always have his back. The world might forget, but they remember, and they will show up. If this story of honor and respect moved you, please consider subscribing for more stories that celebrate our nation's heroes. We believe these are the narratives that deserve to go viral. In the comments below, share a story of a veteran who inspires you. Let's work together to fill our shared spaces with the respect and gratitude they have earned. Thank you for watching.